Hi, welcome. What can I get for you?
How many kids do you have? I've got
It's semester. Mostly 8. Oh, that's so good to hear.
The population of London, Ontario is
I'm
about
sorry, I wanted to be
383,800.
We started about 6 months ago. Like you lost
Hey, I love what you did.
Everything doesn't have to be about you. You don't need to just do this, do that. That's your job. I want to be done with one of these guys. Where's that life? So let me
Well, good morning. One of the things that has been incredible to watch and to see, I guess it was last January, we went through a series entitled, got toilet paper in my hands, went through a series entitled Resolutions. And one of the questions that was posed through the course of that series is, what breaks your heart? And one of the things you got to see right here with this video is the outpouring of that simple question. I remember a couple months ago, I got a phone call from Mr. Owens, the individual that leads our campus group in Boyd, and he basically asked me, he said, there's a bunch of kids out here that they are looking for a place to belong. Do you mind if I start something? And I said, yes, I do. I don't want you to. No, I said, what does it look like? And go for it. And he pulled a few strings, and on Wednesday nights in Boyd Middle School, like in the school, he allows these kiddos to come up there. And he started a small group, and it's multiplied into multiple small groups. And it is just so fun to see what God can do with that simple question of what breaks your heart. And today we're going to talk about what breaks my heart a little bit. But before we do that, I've got this roll of toilet paper right here that you're probably wondering, shouldn't that not be on the stage? Because it's actually really good toilet paper, by the way. If you want it, you're welcome to have it. It's brand new. You can see it's still right there. This little booger right here has gotten me in more trouble than I think I care to admit. I remember as a 6th grader, I had a bunch of friends that came over to my house, and we were excited about the opportunity as 6th grade boys. I mean, mischievousness is just it's second nature. And so one of the things that we loved to do when we were that age was to grab not just one, but multiple rolls of toilet paper, because we just assumed that the runs ran in the food that we ate. No, we got these because we wanted to decorate people's yards. That's what was fun, right? And so one specific instance, I had several guys spend the night at my house, and my dad and mom, being the cool people, I guess you could say, said, we've got a Suburban. We can load you up. Well, it just so happened that there was a classmate of mine. She had several of the girls that were in our grade at one house. And we had several of the guys, and so several of the guys that were in our house either had girlfriends at that house, they had crushes on people at that house, whatever. There was this idea that we've got the chance to get them, right? Well, it just so happened that my parents and the Rogers, her parents, were good friends, and so my dad said, hey, we're probably going to do this. Well, Johnny was a trickster. And so we get our toilet paper, we're all ready, you just think about the giddiness of 6th grade, 7th grade crazy, and they're about to go litter a yard, and it's called okay. And so we get out and we run, and we got this toilet paper, and we're ready to attack the yard. And as we are getting ready, and there's nothing pure than just seeing white toilet paper flying over our house in a dark night, all of a sudden what appeared to be the alarm system goes off. And a voice out of nowhere began saying something to the effect of this: wow, 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 wow. This is the alarm system. This is the alarm system. Please leave the premises now. Please leave the premises now. 911 has been called. And it just continued to repeat. Well, we didn't know what to do. What in the world? Who's got an alarm system like that? So you know what we did? We dropped the toilet paper and we ran. We ran and we ran and we jumped in the car and we're huffing and puffing and going crazy like, Mom, Dad, you'll never believe what happened. Run, like go, hit the gas pedal. Dad, what are you waiting on? The cops have been called. And so sure enough, Dad drives off and, they're playing up to it. They're like, what happened? What's going on? What's happening? And my dad just starts laughing and goes, well, we told him that y'all were going to do this. I bet Johnny's playing a trick on y'all. So we turn around. We go back to the yard. And Johnny has Mr. Rogers, cute name, has taken all of the toilet paper and has just kind of left it and put it in a bag and said, here you go, guys. He was standing on the front yard. And we were just like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Well, it didn't help that when we got home, our house had been wrapped while we were doing that. So, but it's fascinating because throughout life, as we continued to go on, that experience came up in many different instances. We would say that, we would be sitting around the table and somebody would pop off and say, hey, you remember when y'all tried to wrap the Rogers house and the alarm system went off, the air quotes? Do you remember when Johnny came running out and had the alarm system and you guys got scared? I mean, it was commonplace for us to talk about this remember when. It became a conversation topic, not just that year, but for many years to come. But what's true of many of us is we all have those remember when moments. We all have those moments that are remember when. Hey, do you remember when this happened? Hey, do you remember when that incident took place? Hey, do you remember when you got that job? Do you remember when? I mean, some of our remember when moments they're quite funny. Some of them are sad. Some of them tend to be rather poignant, and yet the majority of our remember when moments, they tend to shape us. They tend to make us who we are today. And one of the things we believe here around North Tarrant Church is we believe that Jesus Christ was fully God and fully human. And as we say this idea that he was fully human, I absolutely believe that just like you and I, we had remember when moments that shaped us and formed us and helped to create the individual that we are today. I believe that Jesus had remember when moments in his life as well. In fact, I think that some of the incidences that happened that maybe aren't documented, but some of the things that Jesus grew up experiencing were moments that shaped him. And Luke, who documented the life of Jesus, he made this comment talking about Jesus. He said, and Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature, there we go, and in favor with God and man. That Jesus grew, that I believe there are incidences that happen in his life that shaped him and allow him to grow. The other side of that is you see Mary, the mother of Jesus. Luke documents of Mary. It says that Mary treasured up all of these things that happened in her heart. Now, we've got two little runts, right? We got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I mean, they're cute and all, but I'm not going to talk about them. But it's fascinating for me because I love them. Don't get me wrong. I think they're really cool. They're fun. They're awesome to hang out with. But it is so cool to see when I come home and Alden's sitting there and tired, as you can tell, from trying to chase these two little ones around. But yet there is this love in conjunction with this worn outness that is just so beautiful to see. And when you begin to combine that, you can see the wheels turning in her mind and in her heart as she's treasuring every single moment and every single experience and everything that happens within this 2-year-old and 3-year-old's life. There's this element of it being treasured. And we talk about from time to time of, man, I can't wait till they're older and we can say, you remember when? Do you remember when this happened? And I think the same is true with Mary. That Mary, in so many different instances growing up and being the mother of Jesus, I believe that there were many times where she treasured those moments, even though it's like, he can do no wrong. What is wrong with this picture? She treasured those moments. And I think one of those moments probably happened when Jesus was born. I mean, it's a story we talk about and a story that we make really cute, but you think about the story at place. And I can imagine, and now this is me using a little bit of liberties and telling the story, but Jesus was an incredible storyteller. I mean, you read through the accounts of Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, and you see Jesus being a remarkable storyteller. And I bet he got that from his mama. I bet he got some of those tendencies from his mom as she would be trying to do the bedtime routines at night when she's trying to get the Son of God to go to sleep. And she's probably beginning to think, okay, I'm going to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story of what it was like when I was growing up. I want to tell you a story about. And enter James, who's really trying to figure out some way to make himself look good against Jesus. I bet James probably from time to time would say, hey, just like any good younger brother does, hey, Mom, could you tell that story of when Jesus was born and there was no room for him? Could you talk about that when, I was born in a home at least. He was born with donkeys and with cattle. Could you tell that story again? And I can only imagine that Mary, just with this glisten of an eye, begins to recount what was going on. That night when we're walking and we've been on this donkey and I've been 9 months pregnant and I'm just ready to explode, and we're walking, and Joseph is trying to get me to Bethlehem, because in Bethlehem there's supposed to be this count, this idea where we're bringing the census in and we're counting all of the individuals. And so I know I've got to get to this place, but I was so uncomfortable. And as we got closer to Bethlehem, I was beginning to think, I don't know if I can make it. I don't know if this is going to work out. And then all of a sudden, Joseph looks up and he sees an inn. And he goes, hey, Mary, guess what? We're in luck. There's a place right over there that we can find residence for a couple days. We'll get you comfortable. The excitement. Thank you. I knew this was going to be a sacrifice to carry this child, but thank you for coming through. And then to see Joseph walk out of the inn with disappointment. Mary, I'm sorry. There's no room. There's no room in the inn. There's no room for us to stay. And many of us, we've probably, we've romanticized this story a little bit. It looks really cute on our mantle with all of the little animals like going up and kissing the baby Jesus. At least that's what we did. Or maybe you took the wise men and you hid them around the house. Or maybe you just hid baby Jesus because that's kind of cool. But we make this sound so romantic, but in those moments, with the smell, the stench of what was going on, that's not where you want to have your first child. That's not where you want to spend the first nights holding and loving this child that you get to be the mother, the father of. I can only imagine that Mary and Joseph were sitting there disappointed. This was supposed to be the perfect scenario. Have you ever wondered, why is that story there? Why don't they just go straight to the manger? Jesus was born. In fact, scriptures tell us that Jesus was born at the perfect time. Scriptures tell us that Jesus was born at such a great time, like centuries of individuals and families and family trees came together for this one unmistakable entrance. And yet, there wasn't room in the inn. What angel missed the cue? What angel forgot to say, oh, I knew this was happening at this point, but I forgot to make reservations. I don't know that he was the favorite for a couple of weeks. Maybe he was. I don't know. But have you ever wondered, why was there no room in the inn? Why was there no room for Mary, for Joseph? Why was there no room for Jesus? Why was there no room whenever he came and made this triumphal entry into our society, into our world? I think a little bit of it has to do with what shaped Jesus as he began to grow up. And he began to realize and have empathy towards those who experienced this very thing. Because haven't we all been in a scenario where there was no room for you? Haven't we all been in a scenario where we have no room, where somebody looked at you across the table, somebody looked at you across the desk, somebody looked at you at the kitchen table or at the cafeteria table and said, we have no room for you? You're applying for a job and the boss that you're hoping is going to be your future job says, sorry, we don't have room for you in the company. Or maybe you had a job at the company and the boss sits down and says, we no longer have room for you in the company. Or maybe you're in a scenario where you're wanting to be in this friend group. You're wanting to be in this cluster. You're wanting to be in a fraternity. You're wanting to be in a sorority. You're wanting to be able to have the status. You're wanting to be able to be a part of. And somebody looks at you and says, there is no room for you. But we've all been on the other side of it, right? I don't know about you. Growing up, I moved a lot. And so there were many times I went into a cafeteria for the first time. And I was basically dependent upon somebody to look at me and say, we have room for you at our table. There were instances where I would walk up to a table and there's no room, there's no room, there's no room. But isn't it so valuable when you walk up to a table and somebody says, hey, no, we're going to make room for you? Like, we're going to go and grab a chair and just scoot over. This kid, he needs to sit with us. Scoot over. We're going to make room for you. Maybe you're trying to get that job. You've wanted it for so long and you continue to apply, and somebody finally sees your resume and they say, you know what, we don't have room right now, but we're going to make room for you because you seem like the kind of person we want to have. We are going to make room for you. But you know, it's true of so many things that when we find an avenue that they make room for us, it lets us breathe easy. But when we're told there's no room for you, it can be difficult. And you know, I've seen that this is not just true in the country clubs or in the job statuses or in fraternities or sororities. Isn't this true in religion too? I mean, isn't it true in religion? I mean, somewhere along the line, we were told that to be religious, to be in this club, to be in this church, there is a standard of living you have to abide by. And in fact, many of us think when it comes to religion, that religion does this. It sizes you up to see if you fit in. I mean, it sizes you up to see if, can you fit into our religion? Let me see, do you measure up to what it takes to be in this club? And many of us throughout the course of life, we've found that religion sizes us up and to see if we can fit in. and what we found is religion just makes room for a few. And we're trying to figure out, what is that few? What is that few? I mean, how good is good enough? We ask that question all the time. How good is good enough? Like, if I do this, am I still in? If I do this, am I still in? How good is good enough? Because let's be honest, if it's Mother Teresa good, I'm toast. But maybe good enough is like, I just haven't robbed a bank good. Like, I think I'm okay there. But isn't it true many of us have walk this line? Like, we've tried to figure out, okay, do I measure up? Do I measure up to be able to fit into religion? And many of us have gone down that road. I mean, many of us have put ourselves up against the tape, and we just imagine that God's looking at us and saying, okay, yeah, but you did this. And here's the deal, Steve. I remember spring break of 2003. I remember what happened there. There's no way you're going to be able to measure in. There's no way that we can keep you around. But you know what the cool thing is? Many of us are worried, are we the few? Are we going to be able to make it in? But Jesus has something to say about that. Jesus has something to say when we're trying to figure out, do we measure up? Do we measure in? Are we going to be able to fit in? Jesus had a profound statement that he said towards the end of his life, and it says this: do not let your heart be troubled. If you're worried about this, you're trying to figure out, am I going to fit in? Am I going to measure up? Do I fit in? Jesus says, hey, don't worry. Don't let your hearts be troubled. You see, he said this on the cusp of talking to his disciples. Right before he was going to be crucified, and right after Judas, who was an individual who we believe betrayed Jesus, right after he has this conversation where he basically looks at Judas and says, you're going to betray me. And Judas runs out. And a few moments later, Peter stands up and says, I'm never going to betray you. And he says, you're going to deny me 3 times. And all of a sudden, Peter is down. They realize Judas just ran in this hustle, trying to figure out, how can I fit in? What's this going to look like? And Jesus looks at them and says, do not let your heart be troubled. And then he goes on and he says, believe in God, believe also in me. Now, for Jesus to say this in that day was pretty remarkable. I mean, it's easy for us to take this on. It's easy for us to think about, okay, Believe in God, believe also in Jesus, because we've got 2,000 years of evidence, even historical evidence, that validates that Jesus was an individual that lived and walked on the earth. But imagine in this moment, these good Jews are trying to figure out, what does this look like? How does this fit in? Believe in God, I can do that. But you also want me to believe in you? Can you say that? C.S. Lewis would make the claim and say, hey, Jesus was either the Son of God or he was a lunatic. And Jesus makes this claim to these individuals. In fact, this is the type of claim that got him crucified, because he would make statements that would equate him to God. That he would say, I am just like I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the Son of God. He would say, believe. You want to know how to keep your hearts from being troubled? Believe in God and believe also in me. And then Jesus turns it up a notch. And he takes it into a family, not a club, not a religion, not you've got to be good enough, but he begins to equate it to a family. And he says, in my Father's house. Isn't that cool? I mean, in the midst of Jesus trying to rally him in, say, hey, don't let your heart be troubled, don't worry. Hey, don't let your heart be troubled, believe in God, believe also in me. How good is good enough? Let me tell you, in my Father's house, this is a family. Jesus is revealing something brand new. He's saying, hey, watch this. I want to bring you into my home, in my Father's house. And then these next few words, I can't help but think that Jesus was reminded of that remember when moment that shaped him. That remember when moment when he was born and his mom continued to tell him, yeah, there was no room for you. There was no room for you, and there was no room for you in the end. We were born with the cows and the donkeys and the horses. Congratulations, you still smell. I have a feeling that that was kind of in the back of Jesus' mind as he makes this next statement. In my Father's house are many rooms. In my Father's house are many rooms. Hey, don't worry, I've got room for you. Even me, yes, I've got room for you. But Jesus, you don't understand. My name's Peter, and I'm about to deny you 3 times. Don't let your heart be troubled. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? I mean, if this wasn't the truth, would I have said this? Listen, Peter, James, John, y'all come close. In my Father's house are many rooms. Yeah, but you don't understand. Like, this is kind of crazy. You're telling me to believe in you, the Son of... Yeah. But if it weren't so, would I have told you? Would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? And then he turns it around and he makes it an invitation. And he says this, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and I will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. He's making it a personal invitation. He's not telling them there's a set of rules, there's a set of religion, there's a set of things that you have to live out. There's a measuring stick that if you don't measure up, you are going to be out. He says, I'm going to prepare a place for you. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many, many rooms. I mean, the cool thing is this. Ken, Jesus is going to prepare a room for you. I mean, when you think about the personal influence that is, Ricky, Jesus is going to prepare a room for you. When you begin to allow that to permeate within you and to think that this big God, this personal God, this God that orchestrated everything to such a point that he sent his only son into a manger scene, would be reminded of that scene to say, I am going to prepare a place for you where you will have a room. You see, religion makes room for a few, but Jesus makes room for you. Religion makes room for a few. Do I measure up? How good is good enough? Am I going to be able to fit in? Am I going to be able to do what it takes to toe the line? Jesus says there's no line. I want you to know, believe in God, believe also in me. I'm going to prepare a place for you. Jesus makes room for you. While religion makes room for a few, Jesus doesn't just make room for you. He's preparing a room for you. When I think about what my room's going to look like, I have a feeling it's going to be lined with baseball hats. Maroon and white. Yeah, we lost to Texas yesterday in the regionals, but that's okay. We've got another chance. I have a feeling that the room that Jesus is preparing for you isn't just some standard cubicle, but he is a personal God who loves you and knows you intimately to such a degree that when he prepares the room for you, he's thinking about you and how can I make it special for you? Because I know what it was like not to have room, and I want you to know that there is a place for you that is made specifically for you. But let's be honest. Sometimes that's difficult. Because when we think about life, I mean, we oftentimes go to God and we've got issues, we've got struggles, we've got hurts and pains, and we begin to think, how could such a big God be so personal? How could such a big God who's dealing with all of the circumstances in life, I mean, you turn on the news and you see there are a lot bigger fish than what I'm trying to swim in, right? There's so many different things that are going on in this world that how could this big God care about me? And why should I even open my mouth and begin to tell him what's going on in my life? And the reason is when we realize how big and how vast God truly is, it is overwhelming. Because we've got a God that is so big that believes not just in the fact that he can help and he can intervene all over the world, but he can personally intervene in your life. It's times when I think that God is, if you think something is too small for God, then the truth is your God is too small. If you think that something in your life, oh God, I don't know that I can bring this to you. God, I've got these struggles, I've got these issues. It would be nice if, but God doesn't care about me because, I mean, look at everything else that's going on. If you think that your God is that God is too small, then your God is too small. And when we begin to realize that we serve a God that is so big and so personal, that he is for you. When we begin to think about the fact that God sent his only son for you into a manger scene, that this is a God who legitimately says that there are many rooms in my Father's house, and I believe that he legitimately wants his house to be full. That he's not just wanting to make a few rooms and measure it up, just, hey, we're just going to make 38, we're going to make just a few rooms, and we're just going to just bring in the select, bring in just the occasional few. I have a feeling and I believe that in my Father's house, in God's house, he's making room after room after room, and there's nothing more that he wants than to have a packed house. But you know what I found? While I believe this, sometimes there's some difficulty in that. Because the world we live in, we equate religion with God, and we believe this reality that God is against you. And we believe this reality, many people in our culture, that God is just watching you. I've had countless conversations with people that when they begin to process this idea of God, I don't want any part of it because God is against me and God is just watching over me and he's just waiting for me to fail. In other words, God, not religion, but God is sizing you up to see if you can fit in, if you can fit into his paradigm. And the reality is, the truth is, the thing that I believe more than anything is, while this is something that so many people in our culture believe, this is something that is not true. Because Jesus said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if it weren't so, why would I have said that? That Jesus legitimately wants to see more stories like Aiden and Bradley and Zane. That Jesus wants to make room after room for individuals that are willing to put their faith, to believe in Jesus. Because if it were not so, why would I have told you that? So, how do we change this paradigm? How do we change this reality? How do we get people to stop thinking that God is sizing them up and trying to see if they fit in? I think the answer is you. As crazy as that sounds. And here's why. I've read several different books and several different stories of individuals that have come to faith, of individuals much like Aiden and Bradley and Zane. And one of the key components to every single individual that puts their faith, that begins to believe in Jesus, is they first had to trust a Christian. They first had to trust, and good news is this, they don't have to trust all Christians, all right? Like, we're saved there. But they have to be able to trust a Christian. They've got to be able to trust somebody that they can begin to relate with, that they can begin to have empathy with, that they can begin to walk alongside. Because the cool thing is that trust leads to curiosity. When I begin to trust you and I begin to see what you're doing and I begin to see how you're living and I begin to see, okay, wait a second, you just had a remember when moment. And yet it didn't faze you. You just had a moment in your life, you just lost your job, you just lost a parent, you just lost something. Something in life told you there's no room for you anymore, and yet in the midst of that, it didn't faze you. You still have that joy from before. There's something different about you. What is it? And the curiosity that stirred from that trust leads to a willingness to change. See, I absolutely believe that there are so many people in our culture, in our community today, that are walking around and they're believing that this God that we serve is just trying to size them up and see, can you fit in? I'll never be able to do this. I'm not good enough. I'll never be able to live this way. I'll never be able to be a Christian. I'll never be able to go to church because as soon as I walk in the doors, lightning's going to strike because have you seen what I did in college? But when that person begins to trust you, and you, and you, and they begin to see your faith, and they begin to see your remember when moments, they will begin to ask questions. In the same way Jesus used so many of his stories of his life, I believe that his remember when moments shaped him, that it created him, that it challenged him, it allowed him to grow in wisdom and in stature so that he could grow up and he could have empathy towards, and he could say, you know what, I know what it's like not to have room. I know what it's like to be in your shoes. I know what it's like to walk in those sandals because I've been there. I've done that. So here's an invitation. Here's the cool thing that Jesus says, is I'm going to prepare a place for you. And here's what I believe, is that in this room, many of us in here today, that idea of putting our belief in God, much like what Aiden and Bradley and Zane did, that's difficult. That's foreign. You begin to ask questions, can God really love me? I want you to know, God can. And he does. And we want to come alongside you and walk with you as you begin to realize that God is such a big God, that he's for you, he loves you, and he's preparing a place for you. On the other side of that is, many of us have individuals that are far from God, that have no want to about church. And maybe our first step is to live a life that makes them say, what? Maybe our next step is to live a life in such a way that we have our faith and our joy that is unshakable. Yeah, we're here together. There's times that life stinks, and that's why I say circles are better than rows. All the time. But how cool is it if we have a circle we can say, and then we go into the world and we say, you know what? I've got friends that hold me up and keep me walking in the midst of this struggle. I'm not perfect, but I have a God that made room for me. And I am going to put my faith there. I want to pray. God, I love you. And God, I thank you so much for the fact that you are a big God. And God, I thank you for the fact that God, you, even in my own stupidity, God, you are preparing a room for me, that you made a way for me to put my faith in you. And so, God, I do ask that, God, if there are individuals in this room that are curious, that want to put their faith in you, God, we ask that we can be curators of that conversation, that we can begin to help process and think through and ask questions to help us, Father, take on our own faith, much like Bradley and Aiden and Zane. And God, for all of us in here, I pray that you would allow us to have the boldness, Father, to live out our faith in our everyday life. Because, God, there are people in our sphere of influence that are looking for hope, that are looking for answers. And, God, may our trust be a segue to their eternity. God, I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. God, and I ask all of this in your Son's name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Hey, real quick, I want to let you know, next week we are beginning a brand new series entitled Breathing Room. One of the things that I've found in my life that it's difficult to allow people in and to really allow people to trust me is because I've got no margin in my life. I go and I go and I go and I go. And oftentimes when there's a lack of margin, there's really the lack of opportunity to stop and say, how are you doing? To stop and say, what can I do to help? And so we're going to begin a 4-part series next week entitled Breathing Room, as we're going to look at how practically we can put margin in our life so we can be better curators of trust in every avenue we're in. But right now, I'm excited because outside we are going to celebrate baptism and we're going to give you Steel City Pops. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to release, there is kids and there's kids and there's kids. You can go pick up your kids, and once everybody's out, we will begin our baptism in just a moment. Thank y'all, and we'll see you next week. Bye.